Karen decided that rules didn't apply to her. Crossing the forbidden line and attempting to touch the royal guardsman, she was confident in her immunity. But his unexpected reaction not only ruined her plans, but also shocked the crowd. What happened next changed everything. London greeted the new day, quiet and slightly overcast. The square in front of Buckingham Palace had come to life as usual, with tourists, photographers, and locals stopping to take in the majestic scene. A guardsman, a young man with dark skin, sharp facial features, and impeccable posture, stood at his post. His red uniform gleamed in the dim winter sunlight, and the tall bearskin hat added grandeur to his figure. Silent as a statue, he embodied discipline and honor. But then she appeared in the crowd. Karen, a full-figured woman of about 45, wearing a garishly bright yellow dress covered in sequins. Her short-cropped blonde hair stuck out in various directions, and her face displayed a blend of smugness and irritation. With a leopard print crossbody bag, platform sandals, and an enormous selfie stick in hand, it was clear she wasn't here to quietly admire British tradition. "Move it," Karen barked, shoving her way through other tourists. "I'm making content for Instagram." Her words carried the tone of someone who believed herself the most important person there. The crowd glanced at her with disapproval but chose to avoid confrontation, stepping aside for this self-proclaimed star. "Finally," she muttered as she reached the front row. Grabbing her selfie stick, Karen raised it high, adjusting the angle. The guardsman remained motionless, his focus betrayed only by the faint tension in his shoulders, visible to anyone paying close attention. "This is going to be my best shot in London," she declared loudly, as if hosting her own personal show. Some tourists chuckled. A young man in glasses commented, "I hope you realize this isn't Disneyland." Karen shot him a disdainful glare. "I'm a tourist. I paid for this trip and I deserve amazing photos," she snapped, as if demanding respect for her expenses. Behind her, someone murmured under their breath, "People like her ruin everything." The guardsman, meanwhile, stood stoically as required, not uttering a word. He had seen people like Karen countless times, those who treated him not as a symbol of tradition and history, but as a prop for their photos. Karen took several shots, but her irritated sighs suggested none of them were to her liking. "Does this guy even move? Or am I posing with a mannequin here?" She sneered at the crowd, but no one replied. Instead, one of the tourists quietly remarked, "Maybe you should just enjoy the moment instead of making a scene." But Karen wasn't one to back down. She was already scheming about how to get a reaction out of this stone-faced guy to make her photo truly come alive. Karen, having already taken several photos, was visibly dissatisfied. The shots didn't match her idea of viral content, and the unflinching guardsman annoyed her even more. She stepped closer, raising her camera to capture his face in the frame. "Hey, smile! I'm filming you," she yelled, as if demanding he obey her whims. The crowd began murmuring. Some filmed the scene on their phones, while others whispered disapproving comments. "He's not a clown. This is his job. Show some respect," someone called out from the middle of the crowd. Karen scoffed, clearly not feeling she'd done anything wrong. Her self-assurance radiated from her. "It's just a photo," she said with an exaggerated eye roll. "I'm a tourist. I have the right." With those words, she approached the edge of the white line that separated her from the guardsman. Her selfie stick rose higher, and her expression screamed, "I will get what I want." Slowly, she raised her hand, as if preparing to touch his bearskin hat. The crowd gasped, and someone shouted, "Don't you dare! That's crossing the line!" But Karen was no longer listening. She was convinced her actions were a harmless joke, rather than a breach of boundaries. Then, suddenly, the guardsman stomped his foot sharply. The sound of his boot reverberated across the square like a gunshot. Karen jumped back in fright, dropping her selfie stick. The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. "What kind of rudeness is this?" Karen shouted, her face red with anger. "I'm a tourist, and I spend money." Someone in the crowd sarcastically chimed in, and you clearly lost your common sense along the way. Karen picked up her selfie stick, clearly ready to resume her attack. However, the mood of the crowd had shifted firmly against her. Some were filming the scene, while others openly voiced their disapproval. The guardsman, meanwhile, resumed his majestic stance, as if nothing had happened. His quiet and stillness seemed to amplify his dignity, contrasting sharply with Karen's antics. In the background, comments rippled through the crowd. People like her make tourists look bad. If you want a show, go to Disneyland. Bravo to the guardsman, he's a true professional. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. She began loudly arguing with the crowd, trying to justify her actions, but her words were drowned out by laughter and criticism. The guardsman, embodying resilience and honor, stood frozen like a monument, unshaken by the spectacle. Karen, buoyed by the crowd's laughter, felt like a true star. She was already imagining the video going viral, garnering millions of likes and comments. However, the guardsman's firm stomp and his commanding presence had only fueled her desire to prove her superiority. "If you won't pose, I'll make a show myself," Karen shouted as she crossed the white line, treating it like her personal runway. She approached the guardsman, raising her hand to touch his shoulder. Her face bore a triumphant smirk, full of defiance. The crowd froze. Some pulled out their phones. Others watched in disbelief. But before Karen could execute her bold move, the attention of everyone shifted to a child in the crowd. A small boy, about 5 years old and dressed in a warm blue jacket, had slipped from his mother's grasp and wandered dangerously close to the guardsman's horse. Startled by the noise and commotion, the boy stumbled and fell, ending up dangerously near the massive animal. The guardsman, defying protocol, suddenly stepped forward. His movement was deliberate and assured, but free of aggression. He leaned down, gently lifted the boy off the ground, and handed him back to his mother. "It's all right," he said softly but firmly. The crowd erupted in applause. People recorded the moment, shouting words of admiration. "A true hero! Now that's an example for everyone." Karen, watching the scene unfold, stood frozen in uncertainty. All eyes and cameras were now on the guardsman, not her. He returned to his position, adjusted his uniform, and resumed his stoic stance as though nothing had happened. "What about me?" Karen shouted indignantly, trying to reclaim the spotlight. Her words were drowned out by the crowd's enthusiasm. Someone shouted back at her, "Maybe you should learn a little dignity from him." Karen stood in complete bewilderment, realizing her show had failed. Instead of earning likes, she had garnered ridicule and scorn. The guardsman, despite breaking protocol, had earned the admiration of the crowd, and perhaps even a place in history as an example of true honor and kindness. Karen returned to her friends, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. She threw her selfie stick onto the ground as if it were the cause of her failure. Around her, people were still buzzing about what had just happened, their voices filled with admiration for the guardsman. "Now that is a real hero, not some circus act," one tourist proclaimed loudly, casting a glance at Karen as she nervously adjusted the sequins on her dress. Karen felt her anger boiling inside her, but there was nothing left for her to do. Instead of staging another outburst, she stood silently on the sidelines as the crowd began to disperse. Her friends tried to comfort her, but even they couldn't suppress their laughter at her pitiful state. Meanwhile, the guardsman, adjusting his bearskin hat and silently brushing off his uniform, resumed his post. His calmness in the face of such tense moments earned even more respect from the crowd than his earlier actions. Someone called out from the crowd, "Bravo! Keep it up, soldier!" As the crowd thinned, the story was only beginning to gain momentum online. Footage of the incident quickly went viral, spreading across social media platforms. In the comments section, users expressed their outrage at Karen's behavior. Such disrespect. These guardsmen serve their country. They're not here to entertain tourists. Classic Karen moment. Hopefully, She learned something from this. With every passing minute, Karen's reputation spiraled into becoming an object of ridicule. Her failed attempt at fame turned into an embarrassment she could never have predicted. The guardsman, however, remained the embodiment of calm and dignity. His image, a symbol of honor and discipline, stood as a powerful reminder that the traditions he protected were far more significant than fleeting moments of entertainment. As Karen slinked away in silence, a faint smirk could be seen on the face of a passerby who muttered under his breath, "And that's why you don't mess with a guardsman."